Hi, I'm Denise, and I'm the founder and therapist at Infinite Hope Counselling. I wanted to come on today to do a vlog, the next one in my small series around common themes and threads that I see within the therapy space. And really, the idea is just to build a series of these videos that might be helpful to people. I'll explore concepts and ideas. Some of you might have heard of them, some of them might not be, but they're my interpretation and take on these ideas, and I'll explain how I work with them in the therapy space. So today I'm going to talk to you about trauma fatigue. And trauma fatigue falls into two categories: the physical, the emotional and the mental. So what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about how I see trauma fatigue, and then I'll go into the separate caveats of it. So trauma really is an umbrella term for various different things, and that can be anything from sexual violence, domestic abuse, PTSD, bullying, emotional neglect, the list goes on. But rather than say each one of those things separately as a fatigue, we'll look at it as the umbrella of trauma. So obviously fatigue means to be tired or exhausted from something, and I think many of you watching this, as particularly if you're my clients or are impacted by trauma, will understand that trauma fatigue is something that is very, very real. So what is it? Well, I'm going to look at the physical aspect of this first, and then I will deviate into the emotional and, I guess, processing part of it. So you can be physically exhausted from having trauma. When you've had trauma and been impacted by it, you're often hypervigilant. You can suffer from flashbacks, nightmares. You can be worried about things. Often you overthink. Your anxiety levels will be very challenged by day-to-day living, and so you often don't sleep as well. Your mind's on overdrive and you can't relax. So there's a real physical element to this, and that can be you just feel exhausted, like you're wading through treacle. Now we have to be a little bit careful when we look at this, because people who've experienced trauma can also be susceptible to conditions such as chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, etc. And there's a lot of research currently being done between the links of those things and trauma and the impact on the nervous system, which is really good, because it hopefully will go to recognise that the impact of trauma is severe and long lasting. So you can have this sort of fatigue, almost like muscle fatigue, where you just get to a point where you can't take any more, and that's really hard. But then there's another side of this, and this is something that I see quite often in my therapy space, which is, therapy is hard, especially when you've had trauma or traumatic events and you relive them or go through them by working with a therapist and trying to process them. And you can get to a point where you're just so frustrated, angry, upset, annoyed, disappointed, whatever word you want to choose, at the fact that you're constantly having to think or process trauma. It can start to feel very unjust and unfair, because obviously no one asks for traumatic events to happen to them and no one deserves them to happen to them. So you end up going through this full circle of, first of all, not really seeing the trauma, then acknowledging the trauma, and then always acknowledging the trauma and the trauma always being there. And you can start to feel resentful and frustrated and over emotional, unable to regulate the sense of kind of calm and grounding. And it's at this point often I'll talk to my clients about having a break, making sure they can consolidate the work, but also trying to dig down and to think about, are they feeling trauma fatigue because they're sick of talking about it, feeling it, etc.? Or are they feeling the sense of injustice and frustration and sadness that they've had to go through this? And we'll do a bit of work around that in the therapy room. But I think trauma fatigue is a bit like compassion fatigue, where you don't see it coming. It can hit you like a bus. It can be hard to describe. People around you might not know what's going on because you're short-tempered or snippy or upset. And I think it's really good to give you an example of this. And, when you're a therapist, you've had your own journey to become a therapist, not just by training, but you have to have many counselling hours as well, where you go and sort your own personal life out, which is really important so that you don't bring that into the therapy space. And I've got kind of a good example of this. I was on my last year of training, and the last year of training, for those counsellors out there, everyone knows you're doing placements. I was doing 2 placements. I was holding down a 30-hour-a-week job. I was studying all the hours. I'm a mum, I'm a wife. There was a lot going on, and I was having personal therapy. And I remember arriving, and I really liked my personal therapist. And normally I'd be like, oh, I can't wait to just see her and say all these things, and then I'll go out feeling better. And I sat down and she was like, so how has your week been? And last week you said this. And I just remember this sort of sharp intake of breath and the fear of dread coming over me and just being like, I don't want to talk about this. And she said, so how are you? And I said, I am so sick of talking and thinking about this and not being able to escape from it. And that's how it felt. It felt like I was in this real difficult place where all that was on my mind were the traumatic events that I'd experienced and trying to process them and wondering if every reaction I had was to them or why it was happening, and really analysing myself. And she looked at me and she was really kind and she just said, then we don't have to talk about it. And it blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean we don't have to talk about it? That's what I've come for. But what it allowed me to do is see that I needed to catch my breath and take a break and really consolidate the work I'd done and refocus. And I did still need to talk about those things. I did still need to process them. But I was tired. I was exhausted. I was worn out from it. So I ensured that when I had my own practice, I would make sure that I made it okay for those breaks to happen or occur, or to challenge the clients that are feeling this way to say, why are we talking about it this week if it feels too much? So I'd really encourage you, particularly if you're in therapy, to name it if you feel this way. If you're not in therapy, but the people around you are a bit unsure what's going on and they're feeding back to you that you're a bit snippy, short-tempered, frustrated, disconnected, that you think about what you are processing. And we do a lot of this subconsciously. And I know, and I will probably do a video around this as well, that recent media around Russell Brand, just one of many, that often traumatic events that we've experienced are played out in the media by other people's experience, and we absorb them almost through osmosis. So it doesn't even have to be that it's you that's talking about your trauma. It could be your partner, it could be on the news, it could be something similar, someone at work, a friend, you can hear something. It's just, it becomes all consuming and too much. Now, the best way to overcome trauma is to process it, and for it to be something that's happened to you and not something that rules your everyday, if possible. That takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work and a lot of processing. And I think anyone who's willing to take the risk of therapy and the chance of opening up and having a go is amazing, because you're choosing the hard path, but it's the one that's most worthwhile. So I'd encourage you to really check out your own emotional landscape and think about where you are. Have those conversations with your therapist, have those conversations with the people that support you in your life, and have the conversation with yourself. What do you need? Do you need a break? Do you need to stop thinking about it? Do you need to distract it? Do you need permission to put it down for a little while? And it's okay if you do, because there'll still be opportunities to process and time for change. And it might even be that you need to stop therapy for more than a couple of weeks and catch your breath and then come back to it. And your counsellor or therapist should be able to support that. Now, if you have any questions or thoughts around this, I'd love for you to share them with me. If you've enjoyed this video or had any suggestions for what you'd like to see me do a video on, please drop me a comment, drop me an email. And if you want to like and subscribe, I will be doing a series of these videos. But for now, thank you very much, and I will see you soon.